Stop having kids, because one day they might abandon you. I know those words sound harsh, maybe even cruel. When people hear an old woman like me say something like that, they think I've become bitter with age. They assume I must hate children or that I never loved my family. But the truth is very different. My name is Margaret. I am 102 years old. I have lived long enough to watch the world change in ways I never imagined. I have seen wars begin and end. I have seen families grow, cities rise, and technology transform life. But the most painful thing I have seen is what happened inside my own family. I had 3 children, and today I live alone. When I was young, becoming a mother was my biggest dream. Back then, everyone believed children were a blessing. We were told that children would bring joy to our homes and care for us when we became old. People would say, "Raise them well, and they will never forget you." I believed that with all my heart. When my first child was born, I remember holding him in my arms and crying tears of happiness. I promised myself that I would give him everything I never had growing up. My husband and I were not rich people. We worked long hours. Some days we barely had enough for ourselves, but somehow we always made sure our children had what they needed. I remember nights when I skipped dinner so my children could eat a little more. I remember walking miles to save bus money so I could buy them school supplies. I remember staying awake all night when they had fevers, praying they would get better. Raising children is not just love, it is sacrifice, and sacrifice never ends. Children are expensive. People don't talk about that enough. From the moment they are born, every day costs something. Food, clothes, school, medicine, books, and later college, weddings, houses. The money you spend raising children could build a fortune if you saved it instead. But parents don't think that way. When you look at your child, you don't see expenses. You see your heart walking around outside your body. I worked 2 jobs when my children were teenagers. My husband worked overtime almost every week. We were always tired, always worried about money. But we kept going because we believed we were building a future for our family. My children grew up healthy. They went to good schools. They never had to struggle the way my husband and I did when we were young, and I was proud of that. When they became adults, I thought my hardest years were behind me. I imagined holidays where everyone would gather around the table. I imagined grandchildren running around the house. I imagined growing old, surrounded by the people I loved. That is what every parent dreams about. But life does not always give you the ending you expect. My husband passed away when I was 71. It was the first time I truly felt alone. We had spent nearly 50 years together. After he died, I believed my children would become closer to me. For a short time they did. They visited more often. They called to check on me. They helped me with groceries and repairs around the house. But slowly, things changed. At first, the visits became shorter. Then they became less frequent. Then they stopped almost completely. My children had their own lives, their own careers, their own families. I told myself that it was normal. I told myself that they were simply busy. But months turned into years. Phone calls became rare. Sometimes I would sit by the window all afternoon, hoping someone might stop by. I would bake their favorite cakes on holidays, thinking maybe they would come. Most of the time, the food stayed untouched. People say loneliness is part of old age, but loneliness feels very different when you know you gave your entire life to the people who forgot you. One day, my oldest son came to visit after nearly a year of silence. For a moment, I felt the happiness of a young mother again. I thought he had come because he missed me, but he had come to talk about money. He asked about the house. He asked about my savings. He wanted to know what would happen to everything when I died. That was the day something inside me broke. Not because of the money. Money never meant much to me. What hurt was realizing that the child I raised with so much love now saw me as nothing more than an old woman with property. After that day, the visits became even rarer. Eventually, my children suggested that it might be better if I moved somewhere with more care. They said it would be safer. They said professionals could look after me. What they really meant was that I had become inconvenient. So now I live here, in a quiet little room, surrounded by strangers who are also waiting for visits that rarely come. Sometimes weeks pass without hearing a familiar voice. At 102 years old, you have a lot of time to think. I often sit and ask myself the same question. Was it worth it? The years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the endless worrying, the money we spent, the dreams we gave up, all for children who eventually walked away. That is why I say something that shocks people. Stop having kids. Not because children are evil, not because every child abandons their parents, but because people enter parenthood without understanding what it truly means. Having children is the biggest responsibility a person can take on. It is not just 18 years of raising them. It is a lifetime of emotional investment with no guarantee of return. You can do everything right. You can love them, protect them, educate them, support them, and still, one day, they may choose a life where you are no longer part of it. Society tells us that having children is the natural path. It tells us that it will bring happiness and security in old age. But no one talks about the other possibility, the possibility that you might grow old alone. I am not telling people what they must do with their lives. Everyone has the right to make their own choices. But I want young people to think carefully before they decide to have children simply because society expects it. Ask yourself why you want them. Is it love? Is it pressure from family? Is it the belief that someone will take care of you when you are old? Because if that is the reason, you may be setting yourself up for heartbreak. Children are not retirement plans. They are human beings with their own desires and priorities, and sometimes those priorities do not include the parents who raised them. If I could go back in time, I don't know if I would make the same choices. That is a difficult truth to admit after living for more than a century. But I do know this: people should understand the reality of parenthood before stepping into it. It requires money, energy, time, and a lifetime of emotional sacrifice. And even after giving all of that, there are no guarantees. At my age, I no longer expect anything from my children. I have stopped waiting by the window. I have stopped baking cakes that no one comes to eat. Instead, I spend my days talking to the other residents here. Many of them have stories very similar to mine, different families, different lives, but the same ending. Old parents sitting quietly in rooms filled with memories. Sometimes I look at old photographs of my children when they were small. In those pictures, they are smiling and holding my hands. Those moments were real, and despite everything, I am grateful that I experienced them. But if someone young was sitting in front of me today and asking for advice about life, I would tell them something most people are afraid to say. Think carefully before having children. Understand the responsibility, understand the sacrifices, and most importantly, understand that love does not always guarantee loyalty. Because one day you might wake up at 102 years old like me, sitting in a quiet room, wondering how the people you loved the most slowly became strangers. And that is a loneliness I would never wish on anyone.